Former President Donald Trump attended the start of his civil fraud trial in New York City today. The former president, the Trump Organization, multiple executives, and two of his children are accused of committing widespread fraud. New York Attorney General Letitia James is seeking $250 million and multiple sanctions, which would limit their ability to do business in the state. The former president had this to say at the courthouse about the case.
Hey, it's a terrible, terrible thing. This was for politics. Now, it has been very successful for them because they took me off the campaign trail. Because I've been sitting in a courthouse all day long instead of being in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, or a lot of other places I could be at. This is a horrible situation for our country. It's never happened before.
For more on this, Gómez and Robert Costa joins us now. Finn is CBS News' political director, and Robert is CBS News' chief election and campaign correspondent. Robert, I want to begin with you since you've been there all day. Take us inside and first catch us up on what happened in court today.
Just so good to be with you and Finn. Inside the courtroom today, I sat just steps behind former President Donald Trump. And when he entered that courtroom, the tension in the room was apparent. He walked right past the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, did not look at her at all, just went straight to his seat with his legal team. He was also joined by his political advisors like Jason Miller and Stephen Chung, underscoring that he's in a legal battle and a political battle at this moment. And he sat through all of these presentations by the prosecutors in this civil case, the government bringing their arguments about how, in their view, he committed fraud year after year in terms of his valuation. I saw him shake his head, put his arms across his chest, and he lashed out about the proceedings to reporters in the hallway during the break moments.
And Robert, I'm so glad you brought up the political impact of this because, Finn, Trump didn't have to even show up today in court. It's not typical that we hear from a defendant during the trial. Why do you think, it was important for him to do that? What's he trying to get out of this?
Well, as you know from covering him in the White House for multiple years, this may not be typical for your typical defendant, but this is very typical for Donald Trump. He's leaning into the political argument that he's trying to make, that this is taking him off the campaign trail. This is his version of election interference into his own campaign this time around. He's trying to change the narrative, make it more beneficial to himself and to his campaign, but also to try to rally his troops, rally his base voters to say, look at what they're doing to me. This is clearly, when what he's saying and speaking multiple times to press, it is about politics.
And everything he said was a page from a pretty classic Trump handbook about how this is a political witch hunt. But here's what New York Attorney General Letitia James has to say about the timing, which, of course, Trump and his allies are questioning because they say if this wasn't political, she would have brought these charges on way sooner. Let's take a listen.
My message is simple. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much money you think you may have, no one is above the law. And it is my responsibility and my duty and my job to enforce it.
Robert, how is the Trump team trying to dismantle James's argument about why she's bringing forth these charges? And how is this playing out in the campaign, especially as we look at the Republican candidates and as they're trying to get Trump out of the way?
It's not really having an impact, at least so far, based on my reporting and conversations with Trump's rival campaigns, because they see in all of this litigation and all of these legal challenges a potential political risk for them if they go after Trump on these fronts. They don't want to alienate him and his voters should they need them down the line. So there's a bit of a hands-off approach politically. Legally, this is a different kind of situation for Trump and his lawyers than we have with the federal cases on classified records and on January 6th. In this particular instance, it's a civil lawsuit. So a lot of money's on the line. Trump's being sued for $250 million by the state of New York. At the same time, the future of his business is a business that is so central to his public persona, his family, is now at risk because the government is saying here in their argument that everything the Trump organization has done in terms of valuation, in terms of how it secures loans, in terms of how Trump comes up with his own net worth, that's fraudulent. And if a business has been operating under the pretenses of fraud for years, then it shouldn't be able to operate anymore in the state of New York. So for Trump, win or lose the nomination or the presidency in 2024, the Trump organization, I used to go up to see him at the 26th floor of Trump Tower to interview him years ago, a decade ago. This is someone who has the company so intertwined with his politics and his life. That's why he showed up voluntarily today, I'm told by his associates. He wanted to be here defensively to defend what he has done and his own company.
And it's an important distinction, Robert, that you make, that this is a civil fraud trial. Of course, he also faces criminal charges that the DOJ has brought against him. On 60 Minutes, the Attorney General was asked what he would do if President Biden asked him to take action on the Trump investigations. And here's what he had to say. Let's listen.
I am sure that that will not happen, but I would not do anything in that regard. And if necessary, I would resign. But there is no sense that anything like that will happen.
Have you ever had to tell him hands off these investigations, Mr. President?
No, because he has never tried to put hands on these investigations.
So, Finn, we just heard from Garland. We hear often from President Biden that he is completely separate from whatever the DOJ does. Do you think that's enough? Does the public believe that these Trump investigations have nothing to do with the 2024 presidential race?
I think half the public probably believes that. I think if you look at the Republican side of the field, if you will, they probably believe an alternate narrative, and that is the one that I think you're hearing from Trump and the Trump campaign, which is this is done for a political calculus. There's a political motivation for this, but as you've seen, the Attorney General, they're trying to draw a line and be frank and show that contrast. And I think there's also a contrast between this administration, what they're trying to showcase, and what they think is the big difference between this administration and the previous one, the Trump administration, where where there was the allegations of that influence, the allegations of that push to have the Attorney General. If you recall, Bill Barr's the push on Bill Barr by the former president to do some of these similar type of investigations. So I think the Biden administration is trying to really denote that line. And
Robert, with so many Trump investigations, should the public get used to seeing what we saw today? Trump sitting in a courtroom, preparing to make remarks every chance he gets, because this is going to be a long road ahead with so many indictments he faces.
It's part of a pattern we've seen from former President Trump. He likes to show up at times. Sometimes he's required to by law if he's indicted and there's an arraignment. But in this case, it was voluntary, but he showed up. When you think back to Trump's history in New York, I mean, this is someone who has always lived a public life. He has lived a life where he wants to make sure he's out there, whether it's in Page 6 in the tabloids or talking to reporters or on the campaign trail. He's doing it his way and having himself define his own public role, not his own age. I mean, think about Corey Lewandowski and so many people who've worked for Trump campaigns over the years. They say it's Trump himself who wants to be out front. That's where he was again today.
Okay, Robert, Costa, thank you so much. Finn Gómez, always great to see you both. Appreciate it.